Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Paddle Monster newsletter. I thought I would change the setting that I'm filming in just for fun, so that you can get a feel for what a Canadian winter is like. Um, Over the next several weeks, I'd like to talk to you about something that's of great interest to me, and I think it's really interesting and useful to dive into as paddlers to see, to learn more about it and see if we can use it to our advantage. So, what I'm talking about is science, sports science, and its impact on sport and athletic performance. So, if we look at the Olympics and we see athletes competing at the Olympics, those athletes that are doing well, that are contending to make the finals, that are in the top half of the finals or standing in the podium, they're all big beneficiaries of the of sports science and what it can deliver to athletes and coaches to improve performance. And it can be as simple as basically just allowing coaches to write a really effective training program based on scientific principles. This program would be properly periodized to allow them to compete optimally at their absolute maximum level when it matters most at the Olympics. But it would be a program that would be based on principles like progressive overload. It would be a program that included periodic recovery or deloading weeks, that both allowed the athletes to prepare better for the next bout of really high intensity training or high load training, but also to consolidate gains that they've made to date. It would be a program that would take into account an athlete's strengths and weaknesses and continue to develop the strengths, but really drill down on the weaknesses so that by the time they're racing, when it matters most, those weaknesses really aren't as weak as they were earlier in the training, and they're not going to be a detriment or a handicap to the athlete when they're performing. These programs, these very effective training programs, are designed based on scientific principles, and every athlete who's competing at that level is on that type of program. But that's where it stops for some countries, countries that don't have big budgets for their teams. They don't get all the benefits that sports science has to offer. But countries that are bigger, powerhouse sports countries, countries that are more affluent, putting more money into their Olympic program, they tend to get a lot more out of sports science. And just some simple ways that sports science is benefiting these athletes is that, there's a number of tests that sports scientists can run on athletes to better assess their strengths and weaknesses when it comes to fitness. And these tests and the results of the tests, the data that these tests generate, can really help inform coaches on how to optimize a program for individual athletes. Like, they can actually do a much better job of personalizing the program so it absolutely addresses each athlete's strengths and weaknesses in the best way possible. This testing can also can be used to monitor an athlete's progress over the course of a training year. Fitness isn't something that remains the same over a training year. Generally, they'll test early in the training year, get a baseline figure, set a program that addresses what they feel needs to be addressed for the athlete to be performing at a higher level. And then they'll test again at intervals throughout the year to monitor and measure the improvement of the athlete and to assess the effectiveness of the training program. And so, the data that's generated from tests, and we're talking about tests, simple tests that can be done with, there's some equipment required, but it's not like, extremely beyond the reach of your average athlete to actually get some of this testing done. And we'll talk about that more in coming weeks. But the testing and the data that it generates really helps these athletes perform at their highest level. And then we can even talk about how sports science can benefit athletes in terms of their technique, by actually measuring, for example, in paddling, it would be able to be measuring the amount of power that you can apply to the blade, to the load of water that you are holding on your blade, and how effectively you can work against that power to move your boat or your board forward. Um, and for that matter too, you can even get like a power curve for a stroke that gives you like a stroke profile, and it tells you how effective your stroke is through the entire stroke phase, or in water phase. So these are just examples of how sports science can be mobilized to help uh, athletes, and to help coaches help athletes better. And so in the coming weeks, we're going to dive into some of these different tests, and the component of fitness that each of these tests explore. And we'll look at how they can be used for high level athletes. But you might be asking yourself, well, this is all well and good to look at how these tests can affect high level athletes, but I'm a 45-year-old stand up paddler, or I'm a 40-year-old outrigger paddler. I'm not a high level athlete. It's really interesting, all this sports science stuff, but how does it benefit me? And I'm here to tell you that, we have the capability to test people. And Paddle Monster, we're actually going to be doing this with people this year, providing the opportunity for them to have various components of fitness tested, to get some quantitative data that speaks to their level of fitness and informs the athlete about what type of training they should be doing to best address what their physical strengths and weaknesses are, and ultimately to lead to a higher level of performance. So, join me in the coming weeks, as I tackle each one of these tests one at a time. We'll go over them, in a fair amount of detail. We'll talk about what component of fitness is being measured, what that component's of fitness's impact is on performance in paddling, how we test it, what type of data is generated, how the data can be interpreted to better inform a coach and an athlete on what type of training they should be doing. So stay tuned in coming weeks. I'll be back inside next week, and hopefully I'll be back on the water soon, and in shorts and board shorts. But this is my reality at the moment. Have a great week. Happy training, and we'll talk more about sports science soon.